football, and the latest is a little bit of the same here. LSU trending for another standout offensive lineman, and this time it's out-of-state prospect Micah DeBose, who is from Alabama and is a one-time Georgia commitment, who's originally from Mobile. He's a four-star offensive lineman. He's the top offensive lineman, top interior offensive lineman in the state. He's one of the top in the country. And it seems as if Brad Davis and the LSU offensive staff have him trending towards LSU. Our On3 sources, who we steady go to, Shay Dixon, Billy Embody, and the crew over there, have a couple of predictions in on DeBose where he's now trending towards LSU. And this is just amazing. I don't know how many times that we've had this discussion, how many times that we've talked about what Brad Davis has done in just such a short time, just over a 2-year span with the offensive line. And with his commitment date coming up, I said the number one offensive and interior offensive lineman in Alabama. Let me rephrase that. He's the number one interior offensive lineman in the country for 2025, and his commitment could be coming soon, is what he told On3 just soon after he took an LSU visit. And it seems like this battle is coming down to Auburn and LSU after being committed to Georgia throughout some of the process. And like I said, the guys that we follow in recruiting, the guys that we put our stock in, On3 does, what would be like the old crystal balls. They call it the RPM pick. The national recruiting director, Chad Simmons, moved his RPM pick from Auburn to LSU over the last 24 hours. I mean, what else can you say about Brett? I mean, at this point, you got to give him you got to throw a bunch of money at him to keep him, right? I would think that people would see this and be like, we got to make this guy an offensive coordinator just on his ability to recruit, or how do you pay this guy? How do you
take him away?
He is so good at his job and keeping LSU in these discussions. I mean, I got to be honest, it had gotten to a point a couple of months ago where I was like, okay, they got enough offensive linemen. They're fine. You know what I mean? We can idle a little bit here. We can take our foot off the gas, really, if you want to. While, I mean, I know that that's not the mentality of these guys, and that's not how they operate in that world. But Davis is cleaning up on the offensive line recruiting trail, man.
And taking them from everywhere.
Everywhere.
Texas.
Everywhere.
Alabama,
I mean, you would,
Georgia.
at this point, homegrown offensive linemen within the state of Louisiana have almost become like DBs were considered, 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago. Like, if there was a DB in Louisiana, forget about it. You know what I mean? Unless you're Saban going to come in here and grab a Landon Collins and shock somebody. I mean, everybody else, you had no chance. Right? I mean, now, offensive linemen, if there's one in the state, Davis has got you. If you're anywhere around the state, Mississippi, Alabama, Texas, he's coming after you. If you're in places like North Carolina, Georgia, you're still in play. I mean, it's just his recruiting pitch message has crossed over all state lines, all commitments. I mean, DeBose was a Georgia commitment at one point.
I mean, he had every offer that you'd imagine, right?
He still does.
Right.
He's the number one interior offensive lineman in the country.
That's exactly what you get. Somebody said there were some off-the-field things I can confirm nor deny. I just Googled to see what happened. But regardless, it feels like LSU and Brad Davis is capitalizing on what you've haven't been able to build off in a long time, right? When you have two stalwart tackles and Will Campbell and Emory Jones, and then you're able to kind of keep pushing the message and the narrative. This is an offensive line that you want to come play for. And it was, I mean, for how long was it LSU can't find an offensive lineman, and now it's easily one of the biggest strengths on the team, especially depth-wise.
I mean, the entire Miles Ogeron era of LSU football was one of the marks against them was that they couldn't recruit that position. I mean, they just could not.
You couldn't find one.
They couldn't get them. And you know, I mean, for as dominant of a recruiting program that LSU was under their direction, even offensive linemen that came out of the state they couldn't get. I mean, you talk about guys like obviously Cam Robinson, who went to Alabama. Then you talk about Sed Van Pran, the center at Georgia. I mean, you got guys. I mean, it's just they couldn't get them. They could not land offensive linemen, and now they have, without question, I think, the most talented, deep offensive line room in the league and a top 3 unit in the country. Not only this season, but like for, it feels like the next 5 years, you're solid at O-line. I mean, just by the numbers alone. And everybody in that room is a player. I mean, you look at like the accolades on these guys, they're all coming in with all-state, all-American, all-district, state champion, team captain, district MVP, all-metro. I mean, just all the awards that you would look at and say, man, I mean, all these, I mean, some of them are dual sport players, dual sport athletes that are standouts on
basketball.
Yeah, right. I mean, they're just, it is a very impressive group that when you look at the state of LSU's program, if you're grading and, giving the feedback of where they are, I mean, their stock seems so solid at that point of where they are, where they're going to be because of how they're recruiting. And Brad Davis, there's not any more that you can say about how good he is at his job.
Yeah,
I mean, LSU, if they don't have the best offensive line coach in the country, where is he? I mean, like, who's doing better than this?
Yeah.
Who's got it better than us?
Right? I mean, it feels like LSU has got the elite of – they have the cream of the crop.
I mean, yeah.
They have the top 1% offensive line coach in college football.
And you were saying you have to make him an offensive coordinator. I don't know if he would want to even do that, but I understand what you're getting at.
I mean,
at some point you got to give him already.
At some point you just got to.
Yeah.
I mean, LSU can do that as the offensive line coach. If you can pay your defensive line coach $1.2 million, then you can pay your offensive line coach $1.5 million, whatever it takes.
Because where would he? I mean, he's from Baton Rouge. Like, that's kind of a perfect storm for if you worry about.
He's at his dream position.
Right, and now he's coaching like it. I mean, when you pulled him away from Arkansas, and that's when Arkansas was kind of feel like they were kind of building something under Pittman, and you had an offensive line.
Well, at that point, Pittman was the best offensive line coach in the
right.
country.
And now you see that Brad Davis and what he can do whenever he got out from under. Like, that's when Arkansas was at the peak of almost building something under Pittman. Like, okay, I can see this is starting to make a little bit of sense. Like, they're building something over there. Then you sneak Brad Davis away. He stays with LSU after Orgeron hires him. Brian Kelly keeps him on staff, which is great retention because I'm sure he didn't really know him at all. And he's like, wait, hold on. We're keeping
it was more from up top.
Yeah, because he was
interim head
coach. And then he's able to convince him to, stay on staff. And now look at, I mean, because if it would have gone the other way around, where it's like, oh, you let him walk and you see him start building somewhere at Georgia or Florida or whatever. But instead you keep him. He stays at LSU, and now it's probably the most elite position group LSU has.
I can't think of a room that's any more deep or talented. I mean, maybe as deep and talented as the offensive line, but no group is deeper or more talented than that group. I mean,
what speaks
maybe linebacker in a couple of years after this recruiting class comes in, but still.
Running back?
Talking about today,
running back room.
It's the O-line.
Maybe.
Today it's the O-line.
I mean, like running back, you're still waiting on Durham.
Right.
I mean, you got guys in that room that are a little unproven. They got nice.
Yeah.
But the depth.
Jeez. They're like 3 deep. They might be 4 deep. at offensive line.
I mean, how many other schools or how many times can you look back at LSU history, lose a tackle like Lance Hurd and the sky isn't
Never
falling?
even.
Coach, nobody even. It's
It
like
doesn't
he just
even
didn't.
faze you.
It's like he didn't even leave.
It doesn't. And again, like I never want to have the stance, have the, even the point of view that they are a better football team without, Lance Hurd on the team. They're not. They're, they're not as good as they could be if Hurd was on the team. But without him, you could easily replace it. You know what I mean? It's not as if you can say, like, it's dire. I mean, you just say, okay, hey, is it my man Weston Davis. And then, like, from what I've been told, like, they are in love with Bo Bordelon.
Mm-hmm.
They also
he's huge.
Has been also been training Ty G. Adams at left tackle.
Left tackle that they love.
And like they are very high on him. I mean, so yeah, they really and truly almost sure. It feels like told Charles Turner, like, we like the young guy a lot in DJ Chester, who played a ton. I know they looked at Paul Mubanga as a little bit of a project, but now they've had him for a year.
Would he be the one that Brian Kelly was talking about moving the defensive line?
Maybe. I think maybe just to get through spring.
Yeah, and like just because like the offensive line, they'll be all right.
I get, but you don't want to stunt someone's growth who's on a nice trajectory. I think that's where, that's where Brad Davis is. Where it's like, they come peeking into his room and they're like, hey, we need some defensive linemen. He's like, hey, go keep searching somewhere else.
Keep going down the hall.
Yeah, right, because all these guys are they're on a track.
Right.
Right? Like, I mean, you may not know who Mubanga is now, but the plan is you'll know a lot about him in a year and a half, right. 2 years. Right? But
you'll know a lot about
in the meantime, you can't take him off track.
True.
You can't say, hey, we need you to spin this spring with a
new
defensive line coach that's trying to, catch his footing at LSU.
But I mean,
where
there's only 5 spots.
But I'm saying, like, what if you move him and he's a stud? Like he just like takes on the role.
There
and it's
could
like,
be
okay, now we got a defensive line.
You have those conversations with. That could be the Marcus Spears conversation,
right?
Where it's like, I want to play tight end. It's like, well, you can want to play tight end all you want, but you're going to be a first round draft pick as a defensive end.
Yeah.
So,
right? Do you want to tackle the quarterback or protect him?
Corey Webster.
Yeah. I have your best interest at heart.
I want to play offense. Sweet. You can play offense your freshman year when we don't need you,
mm-hmm.
but as soon as we need you, you're going to play DB because you're going to be a first round pick.
Learn how to backfill.
Yeah, that's all we need.
I mean,
that's what they're trying to. I guess I could see from Brad Davis's perspective where you don't want that really to happen, so you don't feel like you're selling kids a bill of goods whenever they get on campus.
No doubt about it. 100%.
Because like what he's doing with hitting it at 100% success rate, but also I would imagine some of those guys are looking over the defensive side because, like you said, you can only really start 5 on the offensive line. And they're probably looking over and be like, damn, I was pretty good at defensive line whenever I was in high school. If I want to play, I'll cross the picket fence and go on the other side.
A player's decision is a different.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's different. Exactly. I mean, if a player goes and says, hey, look, I see a hole on the other side and I want to fill it. I mean, I see the depth in this room and I see the lack of depth in that room and I see the playing time on the field and I want to get there. I mean, that would probably be fantastic for LSU.
Yeah.
I mean,
like
somebody would be like,
just 1 or 2 offensive linemen, just be like,
yeah,
I think I could play D line.
Well, and you got to start expecting everything that you've seen from Brad Davis. I mean, I think Bo Davis is probably in that same conversation for
it's starting to pick
defensive
up on the
line. Yeah, I mean, he just got here.
Yeah,
and so you have one more portal window that he can go snag some guys, and then you'll start probably seeing the cross-training conversation if they don't pick anybody up out of the portal. But I'd imagine that they are. We're not going to know who they are. It's going to be very much like a Jordan Jefferson situation, Mekhi Wingo, where it's not like you knew that these guys were stars coming in. But what Mekhi Wingo did out of the transfer portal from Missouri was, oh, man, like, what would you have done if you didn't have him?
Yeah.
Because you never saw the Mason Smith saga play out the way that you wanted to, and it's like, well, Mekhi Wingo's your best defensive lineman.
Liam Shanahan.
Oh,
Gotta have him.
Gotta have him.
had to have.
I mean, miss on said Van. I mean, you miss on said Van Pran.
And so I expect LSU to end this. I don't think it's going to be names that we know, is what I'm saying, when it comes to the defensive line transfer portal. They're going to make their evaluations, and I fully trust Brad Davis and Bo Davis to kind of make the right evals, get you some guys that can play.
No,
That's where we are with the LSU staff. We're so used to it being, oh, God, what are they going to do? Who are they going to get? It was very easy to question some of these guys, and now the staff that they have built, including Baker, Corey, like it feels like every spot you look at, you trust them. Joe Sloan.
Remember Daily, we're brought to our friends by Barker Brothers Plumbing and Works. Get in touch with Barker Brothers just by dialing them up today. Get in touch with Jude Barker. 225-776-2431 is the phone number. You mentioned the show. You save 15%. Any service, whether it's commercial or residential. Barker Brothers Plumbing and Works can help you. 225-776-2431. 225-776-2431 is the phone number to get in touch with our friends over at Barker Brothers. They got a couple of trucks in East Baton Rouge every day. They are headquartered over in Plaquemine in West Baton Rouge on the west side of the bank of the bridge. So if you want to, if you need their services over in Baton Rouge, all good. They're here working this side. 225-776-2431. 225-776-2431. It would be an incredible addition if they could put a guy like Debose into that class. You already picked up Devin Harper. You've got Brett Bordelon, who is Bo Bordelon's younger brother, who's over at Newman. Those two guys, Harper and Bordelon, are the two highest-rated offensive linemen in the state. Like we said, I mean, at this point, if you're an offensive lineman in the state and you're highly rated, you can forget it. I mean, Brad Davis will be on your doorstep as soon as you realize you're good. He knows you're good before you even know you're good.
I'm telling you got an offer.
And he'll be telling you that you're coming to LSU in no time, and now they're trending in favor for Debose. You add Debose to this class. And this class now, man, Frank Wilson has done incredible work at LSU, and something that I think needs to be documented. I think a documentary on Frank Wilson would be incredible. Hate to be telling my ideas, but I mean, that's something behind the scenes that we've talked a little bit about. It would be great to track. I mean, think back to when Wilson came and visited us at our last studio. This was last summer. And just the stories that he told, right? I mean, the Duke Riley recruiting story, the Leonard Fournette recruiting story.
You saying like follow him with a camera crew and just like.
You follow with a camera crew now, but I mean, like a lot like The Last Dance. I told you I'm watching the Patriots Dynasty stuff on Apple TV. I mean, a lot of that footage is just really kind of like news footage outlets at the time. I mean, like, you know, somebody like Fletcher Mackel would be fantastic to run a documentary on Frank Wilson. He's got all the press conferences. He's got all the commitments of these guys. He's at the school. He's talking to the high school coaches. I'm sure he's got B-roll of Frank Wilson walking on St. Augustine's campus many a times, recruiting, whether it be Tyrann Mathieu, Leonard Fournette, or, you know, I mean, who's the big defensive lineman next year? Jakeem Stewart. You know, I mean, the latest one. I mean, but if you were to, you know, come up with that idea, yeah, get a camera crew and start following him now, right, and start letting him just tell stories. I mean, what was it like to even miss on guys? Like, what was it like to miss on Cam Robinson? What was it like to miss on Speedy Noyle? You know what I mean? Like the names, all these guys that you were like, no way Frank misses on Landon Collins, right? I mean, no way.
Gerald Willis.
No way we ain't getting Speedy.
Right? But then, you know, he gets Harold Perkins.
Going 5 for 5 today.
Right.
Damn.
Right.
How is that Patriots?
But Wilson, it's unbelievable.
Is it as juicy? I keep hearing it's unreal.
They've only given you two.
They're doing 2 episodes every Friday.
The first 2 episodes. I believe the first episode is called Backup Plan, which kind of gives you the backstory of Bledsoe and Brady, how you get there, and then the second one, you know, kind of culminates with the snow game, with the
Tuck rule.
AFC divisional, the Tuck rule. the Vinatieri kick in the snow. And it is just
Well done.
It's incredible television.
I've heard that the latter episodes. I believe Ernie Adams is in one.
Ernie's been introduced.
Okay, nice. Because I heard there was one quote where he said, like, I think they were talking about it wasn't Deflategate, it was Spygate. Would you forget
Right.
that the Patriots are wrapped up in all of these?
All of it.
And he was like, some things I'll just take to my grave. And it's like, oh, Jesus, Ernie.
Wow.
Like, my man was bought in. Like, this is what I do.
No. Him and Bill are
lockstep.
high school.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he's his Al Cowlings. I mean, Ernie is Bill's Al Cowlings. Like, I mean, he would hide the knife. He'd drive the Bronco. You know what I mean?
Bury the body.
Whatever, Bill. I'm in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
This is what
Sure,
you
I'll
brought
go
me here
steal.
for.
I will absolutely go videotape the New York Jets practice and steal their signs.
Who is that up there?
Exactly.
Just like that, he's gone in the wind. But that's and then they get into the Tom Brady and Bill thing. Gets in a little bit later also, whereas it wasn't all sunshine and roses like he thought,
Yes.
and that apparently Belichick treated Tom like a stepchild.
Yeah, I mean, like it seems to be the issue.
Yeah.
I mean, like that was the problem. But going back, I mean, the 2025 class, if they're able to add Debos in, and as we said, they got Bordelon and Harper, the two top rated offensive linemen in the state of Louisiana. You throw these guys on top. You throw Debos on top of a class that already includes Bryce Underwood, who's the number one overall prospect in the class. He's the guy. He's the number one quarterback in the country. He's the number one overall prospect in the country. Any position, the line starts behind Underwood. He's committed to LSU. And look, it's going to be a wild ride. You got to get across the finish line with a type of prospect like this to really celebrate it. It's awesome to have him committed, but until he signs the letter and really shows up on campus, for that matter, do you really trust that you get that dude? Either way, he's committed to the class. You can recruit off of that right now. You got the number one running back in the country in Harlem Berry. He committed to LSU earlier last month. He's been on the program's campus. He's been on LSU's campus. He was there the final weekend of January. He's here as much as he possibly can, being right down the road in New Orleans. Wide receiver DK Moore, who we saw some track highlights from over the weekend. He is the nation's number one wide receiver next year out of Duncanville. He has been committed to LSU over Texas for nearly 7 months now. He has been firm with his verbal commitment. He is a 5-star prospect. He comes with everything that a 5-star looks like. He has been arguably, the best player on Duncanville's team since he's been a sophomore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, you could make the argument if you watch Duncanville play, and Duncanville looks like they look like a group of 5, almost college playing, when they just like take the warm-ups in pregame. They had the number one prospect in the state, Colin Simmons, on their roster this year, and he looks the part. He's a freak. I talked to people at Texas. He's been everything they thought he was going to be and more since he's gotten on campus in spring. Still, you turn on the Duncanville tape, the wide receiver pops in DK Moore. And, I mean, when it's all said and done, he might be – he has so much
potential.
Like Odell in him, like where it's like –
a lot of Odell.
I mean, like, it's scary. And then you watch him run track, and you're like, everything looks so easy to Odell. Like, I mean, if you recall watching Odell at Newman – another Frank Wilson recruit, that, I mean, there's basketball highlights of him, there's track highlights of him, there's soccer highlights of him. I've seen him hit a baseball, I've seen him hit a golf ball. I mean, obviously you've seen him play basketball. I mean, I've seen him do like freaky things on the trampoline, like where he's like jumping on the trampoline doing like 6 flips from jump. It's like everything he did looked just like he just woke up. I mean, it was like, damn, I mean, that looked very easy. DK Moore has that same type of like, it comes to him very naturally. Wide receiver Teron Francis is a 4-star out of New Orleans. His nickname is Man-Child.
I was just watching his huddle, and it is that is earned.
Okay, so Shay and Billy put out like mock class, and there's another kid that they put on there. I'm looking at it right now. Jacob Washington. He goes to Jesuit in New Orleans.
Uh-huh.
This kid it's like watching this tape is freaky because like I had never heard the name before, and I went and watched the huddle. He doesn't even have his profile on 3 doesn't have a picture or anything. It's just it has a picture now, but it didn't have a picture. It doesn't have any stars on any recruiting service. But this kid is freaky. He's 6'3", 180.
Wow.
And he can run, high
What's
points
his name?
the ball. Jacob Washington.
And what year is he?
He's a 2025 kid. He's projected in a 2025 LSU class.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we haven't looked at any other wide receivers as far as like projections because we've just been DK Moore.
And Teron Francis is
That kid's a stud.
Jesus.
I mean, obviously kick returner, punt returner, does it all, but he is built to play now.
Yeah.
Like physically, he's ready for college football.
And he's coming out of arguably the state's best program.
Most consistent.
I mean, Carr. I mean, they're definitely in the discussion.
Yeah.
They're definitely in the discussion. You know what I mean?
With the Zacharies, the Rustins,
I mean,
the Powers,
the
Catholic
Powers.
of
Right?
Baton Rouge.
You cannot rattle off 5 high school programs in the state that are more consistent and more respected than Carr.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they're in the mix.
You hear the name called.
Every time a kid comes out of Carr, you feel like you got one.
You got a dog.
Right? Like you're going to get one. J.D. LaFleur, he's the state's best tight end. His dad was a player here. He was an All-American here. David LaFleur back in the 90s. He shut down his recruitment early. I mean, he kind of feels like a borderline, right? I mean, I kind of put the borderlines, the LaFleurs, even, Jamie Howard, Walker Howard, they were all on campus together. And, they bleed purple and gold. I mean, if you know the borderlines down in New Orleans, I mean, they are prideful to LSU. They are a generational LSU family who has played here. Obviously, Bo's on campus right now. Brett's here. The dad, Ben, was a starting center in the 90s for LSU. LaFleur is kind of the same way. His dad, David LaFleur, at a time when it really wasn't that cool to come to LSU, he was here. And he was the best player. He was a first-round pick of the Dallas Cowboys. He played a while in the league before I think he had just some chronic back problems that ultimately ended his playing career for pretty early. But I mean, JD kind of is cut from that same mold. I mean, his dad could run, catch, athletic. I mean, he was like a guy that would like be jumping over safeties in the open field. Kind of way back in the day before you were really seeing that type of stuff. LaFleur kind of comes in with that same cut. Again, a borderline, Brett Bordelon, the offensive lineman, son of former LSU offensive lineman, and now over at Newman, Devin Harper, who we talked about, Keelan Moses, who I saw at the gym this morning. Again, him and his little brother working out 5 a.m. over at Traction. I mean, Keelan is as focused, mature, and as big time of a prospect that Baton Rouge has. And I know in this class he's kind of being deemed the face, and he's the recruiting guy, but don't be surprised to see Keelan Moses playing early. Like real early when he gets to LSU. And then they got the state's best cornerback and one of the nation's best cornerback in Jabari Antoine over the last couple of weeks. So this class has been trending in a very powerful direction here for some time. If they add Dubose to this group, I mean, this is an all-timer, man.
And don't let not Frank Wilson, don't let Corey Raymond get his hands on DJ Pickett.
Oh. That feels like he already has.
And it feels like Pickett's kind of...
Like he loves LSU for sure.
He definitely loves LSU.
I don't know if I've ever seen a class that has the potential to do... Like, it's certainly... Obviously, there's going to be some guys that you haven't heard of, but nationally, I don't think I've ever seen LSU rake in this much talent at every position. It's like you can't miss.
Well, I mean, it's... And
I know it's
it's a lot of time.
A lot of time, but when it starts stacking up like this, where you have the number 2 wide receiver in the state's committed, then you have the number 1 wide receiver in Texas committed, and it feels like when you have this
Moore's the
much
number one
player in the
wide
country,
wide receiver in the country,
and you start having that much positive momentum, it feels like you don't want to get out the boat, right? Wherever it's becoming, how could you leave the class? Like, why would you leave the class? Like, once you have this much positivity and the way that Keelan Moses is recruiting people and kind of keeping the whole thing together, it just feels like if somebody were to decommit, it would almost be a surprise because, like, why would you want to not come in and be legendary and have be the greatest recruiting class of all time?
no doubt.
They're starting to